So I think we've spoken at length about the two of our critical stakeholders, which is our clients, our policyholders, and the brokers. But there are other quite important stakeholders, and one of them is the local municipality. So insurance has traditionally been provided on the basis of fully functional municipal services and bylaws. And when there starts to be a breakdown in those municipal services and bylaws, we are left exposed as insurance companies. So as a result of that, a few years ago, Santam identified the need to partner with certain local municipalities in the management of flood and fire risks and disaster management, particularly in the Western Cape. So we've been partnering with them. We've identified areas where we think we have expertise that we can share with them, that we can use to work together in partnership to mitigate risks on the ground.
Perhaps another stakeholder worth mentioning would be our reinsurers. So there's no doubt that we rely heavily on finding capacity to help us manage the spikes that happen in the loss ratio. And if we aren't able to secure capacity, it definitely will impact the rate that we are able to apply on the ground. So it's the number of catastrophe events that we've seen. It's the number of large losses that we've seen. So as a result of the breakdown in municipal infrastructure, which is not everywhere, but certainly is more prevalent these days, is that you often don't see such thing as a partial loss anymore. If you have a fire, typically you have a total loss. And that means that the severity of the event typically spikes through reinsurance limits. And our ability as an insurance industry to make sure that there is reinsurance capacity is something that we need to take seriously. Right. If they withdraw that capacity, and remember, we're not unique in the South African context around the impact of extreme weather events and in particular, I suppose, droughts on the one hand, driving fire and flood and hail, is that we've seen the events of the hurricanes up north, the earthquakes, etc. So reinsurance capacity is also definitely having an impact now on how we're approaching risks and how we need to manage the high levels of exposures. And I think so they're becoming increasingly a really, really important stakeholder for us to consider in our process.
Because in the situation we've been seeing, we see ourselves in terms of the increased catastrophe losses. It means that the reinsurance prices go up. And when reinsurance prices go up, we're paying more for reinsurance protection. Therefore, that also is a driver in terms of premium increases and being able to finance that, ultimately.
And I think we also have a role to play, particularly with our industry body. So now is a very important time for us as an industry to support things like the FIA, the Financial Intermediary Association, things like SAIA, which is the insurer equivalent. Those become our voices into the government infrastructures where our voice needs to be heard. But those representative bodies are only as good as the strength of the constituents that stand behind them. And we need to have a voice. Business needs to have a voice. I think we can't try and pertain to be successful as a company, an individual Santam, or for example, as a collection of independent intermediaries, if our country is not successful, if our economy is not growing. And so it's important for us to have a voice. So I think also other stakeholders must be government. Our voice in government needs to be heard now. And I think the way to do that is obviously as a collective from an industry perspective through our industry associations, SAIA, FIA in particular from our perspective, but things like ACISA and SAUMA, all the various industry bodies that play in our industry are important now.
Yeah. In fact, the South African Insurance Association has established as recently as last month, a fire working group, because we've identified fire as a systemic risk, and therefore we need to do something about it because it's a complex and multifaceted risk.
From a 2018 perspective, I guess there's sort of three key drivers that we're really focusing on for 2018. One is we have to particularly address the sustainability of commercial property. That means that we've been quite focused in the business of reviewing all our occupations. We have over 400 occupations in Santam. Which ones of those occupations have really been creating the issue for us? So let's not try and hit everybody with the same medicine, so to speak. Let's be very focused about where we need to take action. So we've identified a core set of occupations that for us are problematic. So we need to address those occupations. We do need to improve the base rate that's on the pool. This gap between building cost inflation and renewal increases over time has definitely resulted in rate erosion. And that's meant that the risks are typically underinsured. So there's not enough premium in the pools. That's being carried by reinsurance capacity. Certainly that's my view over time, but the reinsurance market is hardening, the capacity is not there. So the obligation drops back into the insurer and drops back into the clients for us to make sure that everybody's carrying their own load, so to speak. So that's there. I think also we're addressing the commercial property thing with the survey processes that we've referred to. So we are definitely increasing our survey capacity. We're trying to do more surveys, and I think the outcome of that is that we will be driving greater focus on risk reduction requirements with our brokers going forward, trying to partner with them to really improve the risk on the ground. The reality for us is that insurance is a risk transfer mechanism, but without proper underlying protection, you can't transfer bad risk going forward. There's definitely a shared partnership model that has to come in place, where the client has to take some form of acceptance that it's important for them to take some ownership on the ground. So I think step one for us is the sustainability of commercial property through those kind of factors. I think, maybe if I may, just step two for us would be how we service brokers in that space is also critical. We need to up our own game, so to speak, in giving them the right support, give our brokers the right support to have these tough conversations with clients in tough times. And that in our minds is talking about evolving our own commercial operating model. So we've segmented our top end of our business into a solution that we call Privé. So that's for all business with sums insureds greater than 200 million, where you'll get a really close, very high skilled, very technically enabled solution for brokers operating in that space to really give close hand-holding through the risk management and placement process. So we hope that will make a difference. And then there's a layer that drops below that, where you still have a high value of exposure, you need the expertise, where we're going to move the business away from a typical contact center. That's still very, very good, I think, for a commodity type business. But where you need to engage more actively, you need more accountability through the value chain. You need a higher quality of service consultant and the background. So we're also going to effectively merge our commercial operating model into a commodity basis, which will be contact center driven, into a service-enabled environment where there'll be centralized people, but a higher skilled environment, what we call a service center environment, and the top end being Privé. So there's also this real strategy drive, the operating model. So we've got to fix the risk, but we've also got to offer more on the operating model. And then we've got to do more communication. We've got to help get the news out there. We've got to work both with our stakeholders, as we referred to, but we've got to talk to our brokers. We've got to talk to our clients. Opportunities like this to share digitally using whatever digital platforms we can, broker breakfast, broker conferences, our award sessions, all our various distribution channels. I think so communication, I suppose, is another real driver.
Yeah, consumer education is key. I mean, even people don't really understand their normal household insurance, but when it comes to commercial risks, I think there's even more of a challenge. So I think consumer education is key, and we will continue to do that, I think.
What happened in the Eisner experience and some of the learnings from that? It was a hugely traumatic event. It's an event that's cost Santam 800 million rand in terms of the gross claims. And it was obviously, from a client perspective, a hugely harrowing experience. I think that would be the only way to do it. But there are some real lessons there. I think the one is the importance of making sure that you are properly insured. So the big thing that we experienced there was the level of insurance, sums insured. And that's again the factor of how much building costs change. If you go buy a property today on an earth, and you buy it for 3 million rand, you expect to insure it for 3 million rand. But if that house burns down and you need to rebuild it, very often we've seen it doesn't cost you 3 million rand to rebuild that house. So really making sure that you are properly insured from a sums insured perspective was a key learning. I think another key learning for us is, what is the definition of total loss? So the expectation is your house is burnt down, it's gone, and your house is insured for 3 million. So you expect to be paid out 3 million rand. Then an assessor comes in and says, but hang on, your driveway gate is still fine, your driveway paving is still fine, your swimming pool is still in good order, you still got your boundary walls, and they all come out of your sum insured. So your house is burnt flat, but the definition of total loss includes those kind of things. So very often clients didn't have a proper understanding.
Yeah, I think that's what I mean by consumer education. Yeah. It is, people do not understand insurance, and we need to put in a lot more effort to simplify and explain and make sure that people understand exactly how they are covered and how it works.
And again, such an opportunity for a broker to really make a difference. And that's also on the positive side of Eisner, if there is one. that's when the value of insurance is really seen. So often we get caught up in the what we do, which is the product, in the how we do it, which is the value proposition, and we forget the why we do it. We do this because we can make a difference. We are the enabler behind a lot of economic growth. We are the enabler behind putting people back into position that they were. So as hard as it has been for so many of our clients, imagine if you were nice and you didn't have insurance. So, the nice thing there is an opportunity for us to deliver service. It's an opportunity for us to really deliver on the why, which is what gets us up and to work in the morning. And the fact that our brokers as a distribution channel live in the communities that they service, it made it real for them. So the empathy wasn't forced, it was real. Brokers stood together, many of them lost their own houses. So it was such a great experience to see how the communities came together, to see that sense of ownership and of rebuilding and that human spirit really coming through. I think that was phenomenal. We try to do our part by making sure that we put the interim payments into the bank accounts really quickly so that there was at least some working capital to get yourself back on your feet as quickly as possible. I think overall our feedback has been very positive around the client experience and that sort of thing. And we want to really also thank our brokers for going the extra mile in a tough period, but standing good for our customers in tough times. And that's really what we're about. That's what Insurance Good and Proper is about. And it's an opportunity to make a difference and to matter. And from that perspective, I suppose there is some good learnings that we've also taken from NISNA.
I don't want to sound like our advert, but our advert says it all in terms of what could go wrong. We all think we don't need insurance until something happens. And insurance is there to protect you in your hour of need. So whilst things are going right, you feel you don't need it, but actually you really need it when things go wrong. And the point is to make sure that you're always protected no matter what happens.
And use your intermediary, rely on the power of advice. Do it properly up front, and you'll always then have a fantastic experience in a bigger insurance value chain.